Perhaps you've been carrying this quiet feeling inside for a long time that something about your inner life no longer aligns with the person you are today. You function, you fulfill tasks, you play roles. But deep inside, a question arises that is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Am I really the person my thoughts tell me every day? It is this strange state between movement and stillness. Outwardly, life goes on, but inwardly it feels like you're running in circles. You sense a quiet calling within, something closer to your truth. But at the same time, an invisible bond keeps you tied to old patterns perhaps. You know those moments when you observe yourself, you react the way you used to, even though you know perfectly well that this reaction no longer belongs to the person you want to become. It's as if your body is clinging to a past that your conscious mind has long wanted to leave behind. Viktor Frankl described this inner tension as a kind of existential emptiness. It's not the pain itself that burdens us most, but the lack of deeper meaning in it. Perhaps that's exactly what you're feeling. Not just fatigue, but disorientation. Not just frustration, but the question of whether this old identity should continue to define you. Perhaps you have tried to change yourself. You have understood, reflected, read, meditated, and yet the old voice remains active in the background. That's you. That's who you've always been. That's who you'll always be. It's as if your brain has written a story that it repeats endlessly, regardless of whether it still resonates with you or not. And the more often this story is repeated, the more real it feels. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. Perhaps you feel that this familiar version of yourself has become like a garment that no longer fits. You've worn it for years. It has given you structure. It has protected you, but now it constricts you. Now it prevents you from breathing freely. This is precisely where the central dilemma begins. You feel that something wants to grow inside you. You feel that a new inner space wants to open up, but the old ways hold you fast, not through truth, but through habit. This is the point at which Eckhart Tolle would say, "You are not your past. You are the consciousness observing it." Right now, you stand between the old self, which constantly repeats itself, and the new self that wants to rise within you in a moment of choice, silence, and truth. And this moment is the beginning of every profound transformation. Cash, safety, familiarity. Eckhart Tolle would say that the body carries the past, while consciousness holds the potential for the present. Between these two poles arises your experience of identity. But here lies the crucial insight. Where science and spirituality intersect, the brain is plastic. It is constantly changing. It reorganizes itself based on your attention. Every new perception, every new thought, every consciously generated emotional state sends new impulses into the neural network, and these impulses can overwrite old patterns. Joe Dispenza describes this process as rewiring the self. When you begin to envision a new future in your mind, not superficially, but with emotional depth, your brain learns to predict not the past, but the possibility of a new self. That means you are not bound to your old identity. You are not obliged to repeat what your body already knows. You can create new inner experiences and your brain will adapt to them. Spiritual science shows you that identity is not fate, but a state that arises from attention, and everything that arises from attention can be transformed by attention. Imagine an old still lake, hidden deep in a forest. The water is clear, but the surface is covered with thin layers of leaves, dust, and traces of past seasons. Leaning over the lake, you can only vaguely make out your reflection. The shapes blur. Sometimes your face appears distorted. Sometimes the image shatters into fragments. Most people would believe that there is something wrong with the water, but the lake is perfect. It is not the problem. It is merely the surface that distorts the image. Alan Watts once said, "We are like water. When we become still, we reflect clearly." This small metaphor contains a truth about your identity. The surface of the lake reflects your learned personality, the thoughts, habits, reactions, and memories that have accumulated over the years. They are not wrong, but they obscure what lies beneath. Viktor Frankl spoke of the fact that man is not trapped in his suffering, but in his perspective on it. If you always look at the moving surface, you will never see what the lake truly is. Similarly, you will never truly know yourself as long as you only look at what your brain repeats. But when you become still, truly still, the surface begins to smooth out. The water becomes clear, and suddenly you recognize something that was always there, but never visible: the depth. Eckhart Tolle would say that this depth is your true self, not the story you learned, not the identity you are repeating, not the image others had of you, but the silent, timeless consciousness behind it all. Now imagine you take a small stone and gently drop it into the lake. It sinks slowly, and for a moment waves spread across the surface. But after a short time, silence returns and the stone rests at the bottom. This stone is like a new thought, a new decision, a new inner attitude. First, it creates movement, perhaps even uncertainty. But if you don't condemn or fight against it but simply observe it, it will eventually find its place in the depths where identity is formed. The old surface may still bear traces, but the lake itself changes with every new stimulus. It is alive. It reacts. It learns. This is also true of your inner self. Not rigid, but fluid, not fixed, but malleable. Not limited by what you were, but open to what you are now becoming. The metaphor of the lake shows you. You don't have to fight to reinvent yourself. You simply need to become still enough to see what has always been true within you. Before you go on, I invite you to take a moment to truly arrive, not in thought, not in memory, not in the imagination of a future, but here. In this exact moment when your breath touches the room, if possible, sit down comfortably. Let your shoulders drop, and without forcing anything, take a single, slightly deeper breath. Feel the air flowing in. Feel her walking again. Nothing more. Eckhart Tolle says that presence is not something you have to achieve, but something that appears when the unnecessary steps aside. At this moment, everything unnecessary can simply fall away now. Slowly close your eyes only, if it feels right. Focus your attention on the space behind your thoughts, not on the thoughts themselves, but on the quiet background in which they appear. Imagine this space is like the bottom of a deep lake, calm, clear, untouched. No matter what waves form on the surface, this bottom remains unchanged. Breathe in, and as you exhale, let go of each old identity for a moment, not by pushing it away, but by allowing it not to be the center. Now perform a small exercise. Choose a feeling that belongs to the identity you want to create. Perhaps calmness, courage, clarity, or self-worth. Don't take this feeling as a mental statement, but as a quiet sensation in the body, perhaps? Just a hint of it. A start. 1. Clue: allow your body to hold this feeling for a few seconds. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be genuine, because a single genuine feeling changes more in the brain than 1,000 repeated thoughts. If you like, take a deep breath and imagine that this new feeling ignites a small light in your chest, not bright, but warm. And with each exhale, it becomes a little clearer. Remain in this state for another breath, just one breath. Then when you are ready, slowly open your eyes. You are here again, but something inside you is now in a new inner place. If you now listen to your inner self, perhaps very quietly, you will notice something remarkable. Nothing on the outside has changed, and yet there is a subtle shift within you, a new clarity that is not loud, but reliable. A feeling that tells you that change doesn't begin as a storm, but as a single, conscious breath. Joe Dispenza would say that every small inner shift you've just experienced has generated a new neural signal in your brain, an indication that you're no longer solely following the past, but rather a possibility arising from your consciousness. Victor Frankl reminded us that it is precisely in these moments of freedom that people encounter one another. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space, your identity is decided, not through effort, but through choice. Perhaps you are beginning to understand that identity is not a rigid construct that you carry around with you for a lifetime. It is a process, a movement, an interplay between what you were and what wants to awaken within you. The old part of you, which has repeated itself so often, still exists, but it no longer controls you. It's like an echo that slowly fades away as you focus more on the new. Not because you are fighting against the old, but because you no longer give it a center. Science shows you that the brain and body adapt. Spirituality shows you that consciousness is free, and philosophy shows you that meaning is not found, but created. Now, you begin to connect all these levels. Perhaps you even sense that your new identity is not something you have to invent, but something that arises of its own accord. When you become still enough to notice it, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything immediately. It is enough to choose the new again and again, breath by breath. Ultimately, every transformation begins where you are brave enough to no longer repeat the history of the past. And so this path leads you to a simple yet powerful understanding. You are not what your brain remembers. You are what your consciousness recreates. And perhaps this is the quiet moment when you truly see yourself for the first time.